You're listening to
Black Connections
on 91.8
Hayes FM.
You're listening to Black Connections. His name is Simon. My name is Sylv. We are here every week keeping you company. And from time to time, we bring in other people to keep us company too. And today we have the very lovely, the very sweet Ms. Danielle Brand, who is an author. We've spoken with her before. She's visited us before because this is her second book. It's called A Love Out of Bounds. So, Danielle, welcome to Black Connections.
Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to see you here again with a second book.
Yep, it's my second book.
My goodness. Wow, you've been working.
I have been working very hard. I did this book in 4 months.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
No sleep.
No sleep. No
sleep.
No pressure. Was there any pressure on you, or was it just a self-imposed deadline?
The thing with me is when I start doing something, I just want to finish it.
Yeah.
Because I think when you start a project or a venture and you kind of put it aside, you kind of lose the drive.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I focus on finishing something, and then I tell myself that it's going to get done and I don't care what happens in that period of time. And then once it's done, and then I can start something else.
So do you have kind of like a schedule where you say you have to write so many pages?
I write wherever I am. I write at work. I'll have a notepad stashed in my bra strap. I'll be writing, putting the notes on the side. I'll stop over in the car. I'll write in, wherever I am, whatever comes in my head, I write. Because sometimes you can't schedule writing.
Yes, right.
It's what comes
do you
into your
work through the whole writer's block? Do you ever get writer's block?
I've had it before when I've had to do my blogs.
Right.
Not when I'm being creative with my own story. 'Cause my brain generally just continuously kicks in. But when I'm writing blogs that are based on a certain subject, then sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, oh, what can I say now without offending someone? So in that sense, when I'm writing my own book, I don't care because it's written. If you don't like it, you don't read it. But I just continue with the creativity, and then once it's done, it's done.
It's done.
That's fantastic.
Okay, excellent. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think you just really shared with us something about the creative process, which is, different for everyone, really. But let's move to the book. Without actually giving too much of it away, what would you do to encourage Simon and I to read it?
Well, just looking
free
at
copy.
No, Simon. Good gracious.
That would encourage me a bit more.
In terms of the story, Danielle, give us a few teasers so that we'll be driven to go and read the book.
Well, it's a Love Out of Bounds is a short novel about a woman who becomes sexually entwined with a man who changes her life, her attitude to life. Basically, what's on the back of the book should be obviously the blurb, which should grab everybody's attention because I've gone into a bit of detail, but I've kind of kept it where people are in suspense, so they'll want to read it to find out exactly what happens. But it's about a strong woman called Linda, who's a very independent businesswoman, who has a daughter that she lives for. She's not afraid to love anybody, but she's happy to be single. Having a man in her life would be great, but only if he matches the criteria that she has in her head of the perfect man. And now I have the perfect man in my... I've kind of used my thoughts about the perfect man that I would like to have in my life. So I've based a lot of my thoughts in that book.
Okay.
So basically, she fears this perfect man doesn't exist, but only in her head until she meets Mr. Brown, a tall, dark, handsome businessman who runs a popular nightclub. He's very ambitious, he's hard-working himself, he feels passionate about his twins that he has. He finds her attractive, they find each other both attractive. He shows her the kind of lifestyle that she's never ever had to experience, but there's only one problem. He has a partner and he's out of bounds. So that's where the title comes in, A Love Out of Bounds.
Yeah.
So they fall in love, but obviously their love cannot be love because he's already got a partner. So based on their strong connection, Linda becomes addicted to their sexual relationship. This is where the sexual aspect comes into the book. Having been taken... It's got a bit of 50 Shades in there, but it's a Mr. Brown shade. Having been taken on a roller coaster ride full of emotions, her weakness regarding Mr. Brown soon leaves her in an antagonising state of mind, and what Linda doesn't realise is that she's about to face a traumatic ordeal where she's left to make a heartbreaking decision. Now, the question is, will she find the strength to walk away. So there's a bit of a twist at the end, because I've had a few people that's read the book already, and they've come back to me and said, do you know what, I never thought it was going to end like that. You know, you have this vision of how the ending's going to be, and then it completely
different.
Yeah, so that's what's made people
that's a puller.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Definitely.
But
definitely.
it's I mean, I've tried to make it a bit more mature than my first book, because obviously my first book was my first initial book of writing,
Right.
and I actually hadn't set out to write a book. I was going through emotions and you know, depression, and I wrote down my thoughts, and then everyone was saying, you know, write a book, you know, you've written so much. This book, I wanted to kind of reflect or do the reverse scenario of my first book, whereas the first book was based on me.
Yes.
And it was based on the way men treated me and how I allowed men to treat me in a certain way, and the continuous pattern and the circle that I kind of let go in my life. But this one, obviously, I was cheated on in the first book. In this book, I want to use a scenario of the other woman.
The other woman.
So obviously, we all, you know, say men are this, men are that. But with this book, I want to say, well, do you know, people always blame the other woman, but also the other woman does have feelings also. So let's kind of look at what the other woman could feel. Now, I've used friends, I've used, you know, experiences that I've been in a relationship with friends that I've fallen for, and I couldn't have them because they were taken. And I've had to remove myself from this situation before anything happens. But there's people I know that have been in that situation, that has followed it through and then got hurt and then been accused of being homewreckers. So I've put stories from friends, relationships. I've put a male friend's experience in here as well. Obviously, he was seeing someone and he had a partner. So I've combined it into the one character of Linda and obviously Mr. Brown.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
That is quite an intriguing sort of story. I like the bit about the tall, dark and handsome Mr. Brown, you know, because I kind of fit into that category. But also...
In his dreams, yeah.
Also, you know, most women's... and if you read all these books, romantic books, most women's idea of Mr. Right is tall, dark and handsome. And, you know, I'm not complaining, but I just want to know why. Why do women have this idea of, you know, the perfect man to be tall, dark and handsome and not short?
I think
man, fair skin.
well, Danielle, you can answer that question on behalf of yourself. don't answer it for the whole female gender.
On my behalf.
Yeah, answer it.
I mean, my preference is a tall, dark, handsome man. At the end of the day, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a light-skinned man, but my preference, and obviously what I'd want to be with, is a tall, dark-skinned man with muscles, physique. But in this book, what I've actually portrayed is that you can have the tall, dark man, you can have the man with money, and it doesn't mean that he's going to treat you any better than someone that is short, fat, or whatever, in whatever size. So as the story develops in this book, you realise that the person that this Linda was looking at was nothing to the person that he portrayed himself to be.
Right. Okay.
By appearance, there was a completely different person behind that person.
Okay. Well, be careful you don't give too much away.
Oh, no, I
won't. Because I think what you've given us so far is just a bit of a
teaser.
A bit of a teaser, definitely.
Yeah.
So you say you wrote the book in 4 months. You obviously were very, very inspired, and clearly you were so inspired you were writing at any given opportunity. Good gracious. That must be a world record. And you've also given us a bit of a distinction as to the difference between your first book and your second book. And you also talk about the fact that you feel you've moved on, you've matured more, or in terms of, you know, where you are at. Do you think that most of your books in the future will sort of have a sense of you in them? Because, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, you have different kinds of writers, don't you? Those who write from a totally fictional standpoint, and others who use their own life material to inform their writing. Do you think that that's the kind of genre you're going to develop in?
Well, to be honest, I think a book that has been written by someone that writes from the heart and writes from inside comes across a lot better, because obviously you can grab the audience, because the audience will feel, because obviously they're feeling something that's real from the writer. I mean, I'm not saying that someone just writes something that's fictional is not going to make the audience or the reader feel, but I personally prefer writing from my experiences and from my emotions and my feelings. Obviously, my next book might not be fictional. I might just do a motivational book, but from my my position as the woman that I've become today. So not necessarily a story, but my life as a woman, a strong woman raising 2 kids on my own. Might focus on that and put it into a book, and obviously inspire other women as I go along. It just it depends on what I kind of feel at the time. If a story comes into my head, I start writing. Obviously, I'm writing another book at the moment. It's completely different to this book. It's completely different to my first book. It's actually definitely fictional. It has nothing to do with me. Okay. So I'll soon find out whether that works or not.
Yeah.
You never know.
Absolutely. And I do think that certainly in terms of writing or anything like that, any kind of creativity, a lot of it's about experimentation.
Yeah.
So you experiment with stuff and you see if it works and how it works, and just you've got work out there already. So hey, just go with whatever. But it just occurred to me though, you sort of mentioned that your first book was very much about yourself. Your second book was trying to look at it from the other woman's perspective. Do you think you could ever write a book that looks at stuff from the male's perspective?
Yes,
totally.
But in order for me to write that properly, I'm going to have to sit down and work with a man to get the
do
view
little research.
So I did think about that, because obviously the 2 books have been in women's point of views.
Right.
But I would actually go into that very delicately, because obviously I would have to portray it properly, because I don't know anything about how a man feels. So I'd have to work closely with a man and how the mind works, because we all we think differently. I'm not going to say a man's men have completely different thoughts compared to women. So for me to do that, yes, that could be a next book after my third one, but I'd have to sit down, and it might take longer to write, because it's going to be a lot of research. I'd have to get loads of different men's views. I can't just take one man's view, because that I would have to get an overall view from men to then obviously put something together that wasn't biased.
I'm just checking my calendar, so anytime you want to confer with me, I'm free in the next 2 months.
But I was also thinking that sometimes it's not necessarily about having a load of different views. Perhaps one man's particular story may be quite a grabber, actually. It doesn't necessarily have to be loads of different men. It may be that this particular individual may have a story to tell. Anyway, we'll leave that to
Simon,
you.
have you got a story? Simon, have you?
So me, I have loads of stories.
Let's take a quick break and we'll come back to your story, Simon. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in 2.
You're listening to Black Connections
on 91.8
Hayes FM.